due to infrastructure, and schools face challenges, and in areas with high poverty had fewer resources to adapt. So here's the statutory provision, and this changed in response to our request. You know, it did just say very straightforward, loss of revenue, delayed, decreased revenues, but this actually turned out to be better because it expands the uses and expands the criteria for getting the money. And the basic provision is to respond to the public health emergency of coronavirus and its negative economic impacts. And those negative economic impacts include the need to provide assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. And naturally, hospitality includes gaming. And then the next one is on to assist workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency with premium pay. And then the next one is the lost revenue provision that they transformed. The Republicans had concerns about lost revenue. Some of the moderate Democrats did. So they changed the provision to say this: for the provision of tribal government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such state, territory, or tribal government due to COVID-19 public health emergency relevant to revenues collected in the most recent full year prior, 2019. Or, and they added this one, to address the underlying conditions that make us vulnerable to COVID, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So we certainly should be taking care of our water and sewer system and broadband, and there's also going to be other revenues for these purposes, so we'll have to look to pull in the other revenues as much as possible and use our revenues that may come in here as a match. To go back to number C on the reduction in revenue, this is going to be the more flexible area money, your lost revenues, and they're expecting that the tribes can use these revenues broadly for any government purpose that they missed out on. So this is in the interim final rule. They summarize it a little bit. The four eligible use areas: respond to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts, provide premium pay for essential workers, provide government services to the extent of government revenue losses, and make necessary water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure investments, but specifically not pensions or rainy day funds. Okay, so this just kind of says what we already said, that the purpose for the tribal government coronavirus fiscal recovery fund is to provide support for addressing the public health and economic challenges arising from the pandemic. So they've got their interim rule, and the resources are intended to lay the foundation for a strong, equitable economic recovery and provide economic stabilization for households and businesses, and address the public health and economic challenges, especially among low-income communities and people of color. Now again, we have to emphasize that this needs to be a planning process that will make these funds stretch over the next couple of years, because this type of funding is not likely to recur. It'll be infrastructure funding, it'll be other funding, but it's not going to be this coronavirus relief funding. Okay, so here, let's see. Okay, this is sort of what we said earlier. The programs, okay, this is the test. Okay, this is the test for how you determine whether your expense is eligible. Whether a program is included in the category of eligible uses, consider whether and how the use would respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So in the first instance, it's going to be the tribe to make these determinations in your coronavirus fiscal recovery fund plan, but they are going to expect, a report on what the uses are, and then it's going to come, it's going to go to the OIG at Treasury. So we have to make sure that we're sticking, close to the rule and the letter of the statute, but it's way more flexible than it was last time. So first, identify a need or negative impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency, and second, identify how the program addresses the need, and it must be in response to the disease or the harmful consequences of the economic disruptions resulting from the public health emergency. So, can be used to support hospitals and healthcare workers because it's a public health emergency, right? So, contact tracing, support for individuals in isolation or quarantine, enforcement of public health orders, new public communication efforts, public health surveillance, enhancement to healthcare capacity through alternative care facilities, enhancement of public health data to meet new demands or scaling needs. Prevent COVID-19 spread through safety measures so you can upgrade your air handling at key settings like nursing homes, schools, congregate living, dense work sites, incarceration settings, and other public facilities. So I think at one of the casinos you've recently updated the air handling. Here? Yeah, boy, we can hear it right here. Good example. Oh, they're starting on the one at the Magic. Well, that's good, and they're doing, these upgraded filters that are supposed to be, biohealth filters, and they're doing, you can see they're doing that at other settings like movie theaters. They're commonly doing that, and they're advertising that as safe to get people to come back. Capital investments in public facilities to meet pandemic operational needs, such as plant improvements to public hospitals and health clinics or adaptations to public buildings to implement COVID-19 mitigation tactics. Okay, so mental health and substance abuse is an area that can be addressed, and they cite these facts in their interim final rule. Over 40% of American adults reported symptoms of depression and anxiety, up from 11% in the first half of 2019. Well, it was kind of an anxious time, where am I going to get a clean mask, that kind of thing. No, seriously, staying home and everybody getting sick and trying to keep your relatives safe, and yeah, it was a difficult time. So children also were very impacted, and school emergency visits, and nearly a 30% increase in drug overdose mortality in that year from 2019 to 2020. So other uses of funds, mitigation and prevention, PPE, ventilation, physical expenses, medical expenses, behavioral health, public health and safety staffs, overcoming disparities in public health outcomes, and promoting healthy living environments and neighborhoods conducive to mental health and physical wellness. Impacts on households and individuals, impacts on businesses, impacts to state and local and tribal governments to address the exacerbation of pre-existing disparities, assistance to unemployed workers, assistance to households, rehiring state, local, and tribal government staff, aid to impacted industries, stronger communities through investments in housings and neighborhoods, educational disparities, healthy childhood, water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Okay, so this is thinking of who could be eligible for premium pay. Lisa? Staff at nursing homes, hospitals, and home care settings, workers at farm, production facilities, grocery stores, restaurants, janitors, sanitation workers, truck drivers, transit staff, warehouse workers, public health and safety staff, that's going to include your law enforcement, childcare workers, educators and other staff, social services and human services staff that had to serve because they were doing essential services throughout the pandemic and that were at risk during the pandemic. Okay, so on the government revenue loss, it includes tribal governments and tribal enterprises supporting substantial cost increases, revenue decreases, including reductions in healthcare, housing, social services, economic development activities as a result of the reduced revenue. So, to avoid cuts to government services and enable tribal governments to provide valuable services and ensure that attempts at fiscal austerity don't hamper the broader economic recovery. And this includes all revenue from tribal enterprises, since this revenue is essential to providing government services such as elder care, health clinics, wastewater management, and forestry. That was from Treasury. Apparently they come from the forest. Okay, so there's more latitude for the use of the lost revenue. And so with the lost revenue, since you're making up, what you otherwise would have had, you can use it broadly for government purposes. Critical infrastructure, health services, environmental remediation, school or educational services, police, fire, other public safety services. Okay, so on the water and sewer, they talk about the critical role of clean drinking water in public health and collection and treatment of wastewater and stormwater in protecting public health. And they talk about referencing the EPA programs. It's kind of interesting. One of the tribes in Washington State did a study, and they took some of their salmon and they put them into filtered runoff water and mixed with regular water, and the salmon were fine. And then they put some other salmon who were not so lucky into mixed water and highway runoff water without treating it, and they died in 4 hours because of all the chemicals that come off the petroleum, from the asphalt. So I think that's a warning to us, and I think that when we think about upgrading the water and sewer, you can think about treating and recycling your water for various purposes, so that whatever you're using it for is healthy. Naturally, broadband infrastructure is critical for school, critical for work, critical for health care with virtual visits, and critical for economic development. So that'll be very important to get the most up-to-date broadband infrastructure that we can. There'll be other broadband infrastructure money in the jobs plan and facilities plan. Okay. So costs can be covered beginning March 3rd, 2021 with this funding, and you have to obligate the money by the end of December, but it recognizes that there could be a period of performance for the project so obligated until December 31 to provide folks a chance to complete your system. I think that's the end of the PowerPoint. Do we have our guy again? Our IT guy? Well, maybe I could take questions, and if we call our IT guy back, we've got another PowerPoint on the jobs plan.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Van Norman? The floor is open for questions.
Mark, just for clarification purposes, the tribal, oh, he's talking. Just for clarification purposes, the tribal member enrollment number, the CARES Act used the Indian Housing Block Grant number, but this time the BIA is using our updated enrollment numbers, correct?
Correct. And that's what we had requested because we were unhappy with that. IHBG, and Eric can tell you about her struggles with that all the time.
Okay, and I just had one more question. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, tribal government CFRF use of funds, it says, or by providing grants to eligible employers. Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah.
Thank you.
First and foremost, in uses, it has A, B, C, D. And in A, they reference the uses of their funds are intended to address the public health emergency. And whether that's preventing transmission or vaccination or upgrading hospitals and whatnot. And then it says that it's also intending to address the negative economic impacts of coronavirus public health emergency, including assistance to households, assistance to small businesses, assistance to hard-hit industries like travel, tourism, and hospitality. And hospitality includes gaming. So when it's saying that you could do grants to eligible businesses, it's referencing that use to assist small businesses. The tribe can assist its own small businesses, and the tribe can also assist tribal member businesses with a grant program that is supplementary to the other federal grants, like PPP. So that's recognized by Treasury as a proper use of funding.
My question is, and this might be stretching it a little bit, but on the lost revenue, say a program put in for like a grant or whatever, and there's a baseline that they would have met, but with the high demand of coming in, they had to increase that baseline because of more applications. Is that something that we can be considering, that something that we lost out on because of the pandemic and everything, and then increased the demand in this area?
You mean, can the program receive additional funding because it had additional costs, and now it's in a deficit situation? Is that?
No. It's just like saying if I applied for a grant and because of the demand increased the base because of the number of applications that came in. Whereas if it would have been as in 2019, I would have made it, and we would have been awarded that grant.
Well, so who are you trying to get the money to? The person that did not get it?
The tribal members.
Yeah, well, I think there is assistance to households that would be the more direct route to help people, but also if it's assistance to businesses, those are direct funding routes. So there can be assistance to tribal members. You're supposed to be able to make up for lost revenue. I guess is that a lost revenue when you have an increased expense? I mean, I think you can fund those programs going forward so that the people that missed out, could come in and get funding, and there could be some recognition of that. they're looking for these costs to begin on March 3rd because that's a date in the statute. So it is flexible. It is flexible to provide funding for assistance to households. So more or less, that's saying if households are in need, and those are going to be, tribal member households presumably, then you can provide funding to households for impacts. You can provide funding to small businesses. You can provide funding to tribal government programs. You can't look back before March 3rd to say we're reimbursing you for something that was incurred last year because the other funding was for that. But this money could go forward and you could have a program that recognizes priority for people that didn't get funding, in the prior year.
Thank you.
It's just that it has to look forward to March 3rd.
Any other questions for Mr. Van Norman?
So March, and then this money is supposed to last for 2 years. So your plan should look to have this money budgeted because they're not going to do another tribal government relief fund. Oh, can you help me? I've got another PowerPoint which is including economic impacts.
As soon as Sunny will stop. Mr. Van Norman, I have a couple questions, I guess. Have you seen the plan that when everybody came together and did the reporting and Dr. Azure from the college put a report together? Have you reviewed that plan?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, could you I think that would be one of the important things for you to look at. On page 9, it lists 10 items that were selected through a survey that Dr. Azure did at Dakota Magic. And on that page 9, number 1 was water, sewer, SWO needs, wastewater treatment facilities. Number 2 is homes for tribal members. Number 3 was plan for hemp and medical marijuana. Number 4 you can skip because the funding's already in place for the jail. Number 5 was the SWO debt reduction. Number 6 was provide assistance for small business owners, and I think that was touched on a lot today, but nobody, I guess, asked the question of how that could be structured to set up to help provide economic relief to our tribal businesses that have business licenses through our tax department. Number 7, Dakota Connection, wastewater treatment facility. 8 was a wellness center. You touched on that today. Number 9 was a meat locker processing facility, so we could start processing all our own meat. And then 10, of course, was the hospital and own healthcare facility. But is in your opinion on those 10 items, do those qualify? Do those fall under the guidelines that you're discussing today?
Well, I think if we go backwards, I think if we say the hospital, healthcare facility. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, great. Oh, great, you fixed it. All right, that's a great IT guy because he can fix stuff. Yeah, well, if we start with number 10 and look at hospital, I think addressing the public health impacts of COVID-19 includes wanting to upgrade your healthcare system. So I think that one fits. The meat locker, I think you can make the case that you need a sustainable source of healthy food, especially since we had the Sioux Falls situation and the problem of interruption of the meat market. Diabetes, health and wellness fitness center. Yeah, I think that definitely fits because diabetes is one of your pre-existing conditions that makes SWO community more vulnerable. So that's something. Dakota Connection needs to be updated with wastewater treatment facility, certainly the wastewater treatment facility. A new hotel which includes a water park, that would be better to use your lost revenue for because your lost revenue is going to be very broad in terms of what your uses are. Economic development, it does say specifically that there could be assistance to small business owners. You do have the model of the Paycheck Protection Program, and you could do something that's, similar to that. People could make some kind of a statement that they had less revenue, that they had closures in 2020, so they have this economic hurdle to overcome, and they need assistance to get the business back up to speed for 2021. So your expense that you're looking at is actually in 2021, but the conditions that caused, the business to struggle were also in the prior year. SWO debt reduction, that's going to have to come from lost revenues because otherwise they don't want you to do debt reduction or rainy day fund or pension funding, but your lost revenue that you got is more flexible. So that's maybe an important consideration. Finish the Justice Center. We're going to look for infrastructure money to continue on towards the Justice Center. So I think we should really think about infrastructure money for that one. The plan for hemp, medical, and medicinal, I think that's related to COVID, especially now that we see all this long haul thing and people have a lot of pain associated. Homes for tribal members, certainly in the interim final rule, it talks about repair, kind of maintenance and repair. But we're also going to have significant housing funding coming in the Biden plan. Water and sewer, yes, you should take care of your water and sewer, and we have to look at USDA for water and sewer money, and we have to look at the other money that's going to come through infrastructure and kind of have a plan that's flexible that pairs up this funding. Your tribal government coronavirus fiscal recovery fund is going to be more flexible than other federal money. So to the extent that federal monies can be picked up to address these from other programs, it'll maximize your community impact for these. But these look to be eligible purposes. Some of them may have to be from the lost revenue funds.
Okay, and the next question, you weren't here at the time when they were discussing education and facilities, but I attended the Governor Noem's deal out in Rapid City, was that a month ago? And one of the things, the Rapid City councilmen that were there that we had visited with, and one thing I really liked about what Rapid City did with all the coronavirus relief money that they received, they put that back into their education systems and rebuilt, and are building a bunch of new schools out there. And I think by reinvesting in our youth and following kind of suit to what Rapid City is seeing and putting that money into the longevity of our education systems, in essence, you're building your community. And I think that the tribe needs to really look at doing that with some of this money as well.
And it looks like your plan is geared to do that. And let's also take a look about what the American Jobs Plan is going to be. And they have, Biden also has the American Families Plan that's coming up. So if we look at the American Jobs Plan, transportation infrastructure, $621 billion. Of that, $174 billion for electric vehicles. So one thing that President Biden and Congress are looking to is the global warming and the need to address climate change. So they're trying to set up the whole country to have the infrastructure to have electric vehicles. $115 billion for fixing roads and bridges, 20,000 miles of highways and roads, 10 of the most significant, economically significant bridges in the U.S. For example, in D.C. we have the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and it's like 8 lanes on either side. So they in the old days when they had earmarks for infrastructure, they put in multiple earmarks, and that bridge cost billions of dollars in itself. So then they're also looking at our smaller bridges out our way. The White House is looking to double the BIA transportation budget, okay? So, we've also got money for caregivers, for the elderly, and people with disabilities. And as you know, under the current system, if you haven't planned way ahead and set up a trust long before you're elderly, then you have to invest all of your money first into a nursing home before the federal government will kick in with Medicaid. So basically, you have to be below the poverty line with their Medicaid to qualify for their nursing home. So we can hope that this will address, some of those things like that. The Republicans are complaining about this. This is not infrastructure. Okay, research, development, and manufacturing. So they are looking to spur jobs through modernization of what America is doing. We were ahead for so long, and then we decided that if we had the jobs go overseas, that would be okay because we would keep the intellectual property here. And then we quit letting immigrants into the country, and so we didn't have our new scientists from India and whatnot going to Silicon Valley. Then they started going to China. So if you look, there's kind of a transformation where China is getting deeply into infrastructure and technology. So we need to jumpstart that, and President Biden is saying that. $300 billion for domestic production of technologies and critical goods. So we have to look at our tax structure and see where we have some tax advantages to attract some outside businesses and get some of this going, like the Indian Employment Tax Credit. The plan would spend $180 billion on new research and development with an emphasis on clean energy, fuel emissions, and climate change research, because that's the wave of the future. About a third of the world's population lives close to a coastal area, within 100 kilometers of a coastal area. Of those people that live by the coast, they're deriving a lot of economic value and food value from the ocean, from estuaries. So what we're going to see is they're saying that it could be up to 50 feet in sea rise. Well, 50 feet in sea rise, I'm pretty sure, you know, maybe just the statue on top of the Capitol, you know, will be sticking above water. Well, actually, maybe the Capitol's higher than that. But it's you know, Washington, D.C. is a very low-lying area, and we're right on the Potomac River. I don't know if anybody's been down to Washington Harbor, but you go 50 feet up and you're well into the apartment building. So this is going to be challenging around the world. If you go to Manhattan, did anybody ever see a cartoon called Little Bush? Little Bush? No? It was about George Bush when he was president. It was kind of a joke thing. But they had one where they had Al Gore come to visit. And you know, Al Gore's this stiff, right? So here's the water is halfway up the buildings, and Little Bush is jumping into the water. But Al Gore is saying, I told you, I told you. But that reality is coming unless we deal with climate change. And so those are big infrastructure investments, and if we can figure out how to team with the big technology companies, it's going to be a lot of opportunity. So, is it better not to tell any jokes? Okay, probably. Sorry. Okay, so this is significant in terms of what your priorities are. And this is going back to what you're saying about the Rapid City Council and what they're doing with investments in schools. So quality of life at home, they want to look at, and they want to put $650 billion into American homes, school buildings, water infrastructure, and broadband expansion. So as we think about our coronavirus relief funds, we have to think about how we're going to interface with this funding, okay? $213 billion for more than 2 million affordable homes and commercial buildings, includes construction or rehabilitation of 500,000 homes for low and middle income owners. And there's Eric in back, and he's saying, I'm on this one. $100 billion for clean drinking water. And you remember the Flint, Michigan situation where they had the lead pipes? They want to remediate all the lead pipes in America, because if you're drinking water through lead pipes, it affects your mental sharpness, and especially in kids. So they want to change those pipes so you can have a healthy living environment for kids throughout the United States. $100 billion for constructing or modernizing public schools. $100 billion for high-speed broadband, because if we're going to work from home, if we're going to do virtual work, if it's a flexible workplace in the future, if it's flexible education and healthcare, we need to have these broadband networks all over. So we could be thinking about partnering with some of our telecom folks, Matt, and maybe you're doing this already, to build towers. And $40 billion to improve public housing. So if you have houses that are damaged by meth, you know, you can have a plan to upgrade your housing that's meth damaged and restore it to viability. This says 18 million, it's supposed to be billion, for Veterans Affairs, hospitals and clinics, and 12 billion for community college infrastructure. So your tribal college, I'm sure, is very active with AHEC and doing very well with this. Okay, so Biden also wants to raise the corporate tax rate to 28% to pay for the plan. Right now, under the Trump tax package from 2018, they cut it to 21%, It was at 35% previously, but there were problems with things like the research and development tax credit, where businesses could basically forecast, big businesses could forecast from the prior year how much tax they would owe in the next year. They'd just put all of that into R&D. So President Obama went up and said, GE, boy, you're a technology innovator. You're doing so great. And then the news folks said to him, how much taxes did GE pay last year? And he said, well, we paid zero, because they're doing that R&D credit and they're planning in advance, and the corporations were paying nothing on taxes. So this is hoping to close those loopholes a little bit, and there's international work going on to try and equalize a global tax rate for corporations, because corporations got to pay their fair share. It can't all be on the individual people. So that's controversial with Republicans. Republicans don't want to see any tax increases. So they're keeping us in mind as they do this, and you know, the Domestic Policy Council has a lot to do with the formulation of these programs, and that's Susan Rice. And then Libby Washburn works for Susan Rice on the tribal government program side for Domestic Policy Council. So they're looking to expand job opportunities, workforce development, targeted to underserved communities to get students on the path to trades and careers before they graduate high school. They're looking to do community college and do a lot more than they're doing now to help kids get into the workforce. High-speed broadband, long overdue expansion of broadband on tribal lands in consultation with tribal nations and also in the U.S. territories. Oops, I don't know if I could go back. Oh well, I missed one there. Support critical infrastructure for tribal communities. And so here again, this is where we need to do our planning to draw down these other federal funds so we make more out of the coronavirus fiscal recovery funds.
So this is all competitive, right?
You know, we'll have to see. They may go through the Bureau and put some of this money to the Bureau to come out as aid to tribal governments. Okay, for housing, Native Americans are 7 times more likely to live in overcrowded conditions, 5 times more likely to have plumbing, kitchen, and heating problems than all U.S. households. And so they'll invest in HUD's Indian Housing Block Grant. You know, maybe we need to seek to steer some of that money to areas of need, and we tried to do that before, and we put in 2 criteria. We didn't put it in, but Congress did. They put in 2 criteria of need and administrability, and HUD went off only on administrability. So we have to watch them. But the Indian Housing Block Grant is always a challenge for us because it's got state recognized tribes and Alaska Native communities. Curtis?
So, with that being said, when we got the first round of CARES money, they're always changing the guidelines on it. So when these guidelines come out on this second round, is it going to be set? Or is that going to be subject to change also as we go along?
Well, our solution that we've been seeking is to have the Indian canon of construction, meaning any ambiguity in the statute should be resolved in favor of tribal governments, because these are programs for tribal governments, and that there should be deference to tribes on general welfare programs. So that's what we've been seeking, to give tribes more leeway. It's sort of impossible to say exactly what people are going to do in the future, but the Biden administration people are more favorable, and you see where he came out with that consultation. It's almost hard to keep up with how much consultation they're doing. So I think they're going to be better. They do have Casey Lozar that went over there to advise them on this. He's got a little bit of a kind of a statistical bent, and he wants us to collect statistics. That's sort of an unfunded mandate. But that's how you get more money, is by having statistics for OMB. So I think they're going to be more favorable. Like, they were pretty arbitrary, with Trump, because even though they talked to us, they didn't listen at all. Yeah, so these guys seem to be a little bit better, but going forward, it's hard to say, but they're good people that we have worked with. And now I've heard that our nice vice president for policy at the National Congress of American Indians is going over, Fatima Abbas, she's going over to work with Treasury on this program. So she understands, and, we worked with her to put, the resolutions and, letters together that were going to Congress. So she understands our position. Should be better, in other words. Okay, so here they want to double the tribal transportation program. So that would help, but it's still not enough, because even what you're getting now is not enough. And I did talk to Cliff. Fix rural bridges, $20 billion over 5 years. Strengthen community resilience to help those who are most vulnerable. And, we did put this forward, that we have a lot of challenge, and that we have a lot of economic challenge and also health challenges. So we should be getting this recognition. And CDC recognized it, so it's good that Biden is doing this. Okay, so provide relocation assistance. Did anybody hear of relocation before? They want to relocate us again? No, this is probably going towards people like in Alaska that have low-lying areas that are on the permafrost. And then when that permafrost melts, all they have is mud. So I guess they'll be building boardwalks. Maybe they're going to have to move further uphill or something. But they're in tough shape up there. Coastal areas, they want to clean up abandoned mines. We have a lot of EPA Superfund type of sites, and some of the tribes have uranium mines and different things. And, we've had that problem with the Homestake mine in the Black Hills with all the tailings coming down in the water. Okay, so maybe that's the end of it. So this is going to be another huge package, and we are requesting infrastructure funding in this package. And we want to talk about a new school for Sisseton, because we have 400 students that are in need of that. Did you want to speak to that? Do you guys want to speak to that at all?
The ladies want you to bring that one up. I don't know, you skipped that one.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't too good on my space bar there. Yeah, so they want to create job opportunities for caregivers. And that includes domestic workers, so they can receive benefits and protection, so that they're overcoming pay inequities that are based on gender. So Biden is understanding the situation of women because, his wife is very active with him, but also because in South Carolina, when he really needed support, Jim Clyburn, who's in the House leadership, told him, you got to get back up on stage and tell him that you're going to appoint an African-American woman to the Supreme Court. And he did that, and he got a big response, and South Carolina gave him the boost for Super Tuesday with the primary. So he's very in tune with the needs of women of color, and of course, Vice President Harris, with her African-American and Asian background, is very in tune. So we are fortunate that we have had our Indian leadership, like Deb Haaland, recognized in this movement to provide equity for women. So in these programs, they're going to put in special programs for people in need of pay equity, and that will include women of color. So they're working on this bill now, and that's part of the training infrastructure, but it's also going to mandate benefits.
So, Mr. Van Norman, this is Cliff Eberhardt with the SWO. You didn't know I was this good looking, did you?
I didn't know. No, we just talked on the phone, right?
So I know they're talking about this new infrastructure bill, and just to clarify things, that's not a reauthorization of the highway bill. So
It includes a reauthorization of the highway bill. And what happened, it will include it. And what happened was, last year, Senator Barrasso from Wyoming thought he was doing a good job, right? And he said, let's do $278 billion for highways. And so that was in December 2019, right? And he wanted to get that bill going because he was the chairman, and it was time for that bill to go in 2020. But the House said, hey, wait a minute, we're in coronavirus. We got to spend more on infrastructure. We want to do $478 billion, right? And now you see where Biden is at. Biden's at $650 billion. So they've ramped it up, but that will include the reauthorization.
So, I mean, they are not talking about any timeframes to this new highway bill, this new CARES Act, or
Yeah, I think they're looking at 5 years.
5 years?
Because what they're trying to do is keep the costs down now, and then if Biden were to get reelected, he'll turn around and try and do it again.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of it.
When they put limitations on projects like that, you know, we have all our projects in our 20-year plan, which we just had approved last year, and our 5-year plan, we approve that usually every year or every other year. And but BIA, when they established these roads, they did not establish any right-of-way for the roads. So when you talk about a federal design, which has to be approved by the feds to reconstruct this road or build a new road, you get stuck in a lot of the NEPA studies. And the design takes upwards of 2 years. Of course, they keep us on a very limited transportation budget that we've been working with for the past probably since the highway bill started. And so we don't have a lot of money to throw at design projects. We pretty much get stuck in construction. And a lot of our construction projects carry off over into, 3, 4, 5 years. So we don't have a lot of projects sitting on the shelf. We don't have that ability. So if we were pushing for anything, we would push for longer timeframes, because a lot of these federal projects take upwards of 2 years by the time you get through your NEPAs to design, and then another year to construct, or 2.
Well, the first presentation I did, which was the American Rescue Plan, state, local, tribal government, coronavirus fiscal relief, that is looking at the pandemic. And so that has those timeframes. Those timeframes don't apply to this jobs plan. They're going to have different timeframes in the jobs plan, and they'll be in a situation like you are currently, where when you're obligated, you meet their requirements for, being within the time frame, and then it takes you longer to construct. So this is going to be an infrastructure plan, and they know that it's going to take longer, but what they're trying to do by limiting that to 5 years is they're pushing more money up front, because when they do when they're going to pass this, on reconciliation with the 51 votes, instead of getting 60 votes, they have to look at spending within a 10-year time frame. And that's just part of the procedure that was put in place when they started doing these reconciliation processes back in Nixon. So what they do by putting that up for 5 years is they're saying, well, in this bill, here's going to be the cost. So we're going to tell you how much it costs over 10 years, but we're going to spend all this money in 5 years. Because if the administration gets reelected, they'll look to come back and do this again.
So we're going to take one more question. I could tell Bill's getting hungry, and then we'll have Mr. Red Eagle do a whoa, which they had the meal. And, but we'll take one more question for you, Mr. Van Norman, and then we'll be doing another Q&A after lunch as well.
Okay, but not Curtis, because he's going to ask 3 questions.
Actually, it's 5 and 1.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
No, the only question I have now is that with all this money coming down, has DC and the Treasury and everybody else taken in consideration the cost of everything going up and what that's going to do now? You know, it seems like the more money we get, the more things we got to jump through. So have they taken in consideration, for example, your economic development now? You know, the cost of lumber is going up. Your cost of everything has gone up and almost tripled. So have you guys taken consideration of that? And when is that going to actually start declining again?
Well, you know, I think when you're going to have a big purchase, you know, in the market, it's going to move the market. So I think they're trying to get as much money out as possible. And, you know, I guess as they look at projects and think of the pricing, they'll be aware that the cost of materials has gone up and whatnot. And they're looking to create jobs and stimulate the economy. So are they going to give you more money than the $20 billion that was allocated for the tribal government coronavirus relief, fiscal relief fund? No, don't expect more money out of that program. You got to budget that for 2 years. That's the expectation. That's unlikely to recur because the Republican Party was opposed to that. They didn't want one dime of that because Mitch McConnell's from Kentucky. He didn't feel like they had too many needs in Kentucky and he could take care of those by another means. He didn't want to give any money to California or New York. And that's the political dynamic. So on this $20 billion, you have to budget it for 2 years. And you know, so I know it comes with difficulties. You can hire people, and I encourage you to hire new accounting staff, additional accounting staff that will help, you know, take care of these things because you're going to expect, you know, the OIG to come around. And we'd like to get that Indian Canada construction because when the OIG comes around, it's kind of nice to tell them, well, here in the law, it says any ambiguity is in our favor. And that makes it a little bit better on those rules that you were talking about. So we're trying to look ahead. You know, the market fluctuation is difficult to deal with. I think in pricing of some of your projects, they'll look at that, but that doesn't mean that the overall pot of money is going to be bigger, you know, than what they're laying out here. In fact, in the jobs plan, it's likely to be somewhat smaller because you'll get some pushback from the Democrats that are running for re-election in 2022. So, yeah, it's a difficulty. It's a difficulty to the extent you have an opportunity to buy materials, you know, it's probably worthwhile to buy materials.
Ake chewaki ekte omakapo. O tukashda wakantaka daku akan daku shkanshka ake hochi chekte. Ampetukde omniche de opera tanka. Oi tanchab ke he wanshida wichaya kukta tukashda. Wanshida yuhama nipta. Oyatega Techab hena wayawaga wonspe yukcha yankapta tunkashira. Dakuku yakupe hena wopera tanka tunkashira. Kashira ampetukde woitega meniu yakupe wopera tanka tunkashira. Washpaya hena wopera tanka tunkashira. Wonshu kadapo ha metakias.
if you haven't signed in, please sign in. And I also have
work with the tribe's COVID financial assistance program.
Any questions? Everybody must be still sleeping after lunch. There's coffee up here, Mountain Dew.
Just Q&A.
No, she said she gave us a said that much to
This is for a specific program, though. This is for the tribal government COVID coronavirus relief fund. But there was other money through HUD for mortgage assistance and there was a big rental program too.
Yeah.
So Eric should be on top of that, and I think there was 750 million for Indian country. So you guys should have got, a few million allocation on that. Yeah, but that's a little bit of a different program. This is just the money because it's current and topical, because this is going to be a big chunk of money for the tribe, and it's going to come down the end of the month. So that's why we wanted to talk about this one in particular. But there's also the rental assistance, and so we talked about it.
We have a question.
Okay, so the enrollment allocation, next to Treasury Secretary determines 65% of the 19 billion, 12.35B is divided according to the enrollment tribal membership of each federally recognized tribe. That is called the enrollment allocation. Could part of these monies be allocated down to the districts and percentages?
So there's an overall program, which is state, local, and tribal government and territorial governments, that is for this purpose of coronavirus fiscal recovery fund. And so the states can pass some of their money on to the local governments, and the tribe can pass some of its money on to the districts. The districts would then have a financial responsibility for accountability, and there would have to be use in accordance with the use plans, because otherwise there is a provision that's in the interim rule for recoupment of money that is not spent in accordance with purposes. But there is a possibility to assist, through the districts. So that's a policy thing that you all have to sort out, about how that's all going to work out. Whatever the district spends has to be tracked, and it has to be in accordance with the purposes, because the OIG is going to ask for reports, and the tribal government is going to be responsible for the reporting.
Any other questions from the floor? Tom is live streaming it. If anybody's watching online and has a question, I guess we could take them right now as well, out there in the World Wide Web.
Go ahead, sir.
How would this work for essential workers?
Okay, how would it work for the essential workers? In here it says they offer, or it could be used to offer premium pay to essential workers in recognition to their sacrifices.
Well, I guess the idea that they've talked about before, and they had this in the House bill that was called the HEROES Act last year, and it was trying to compensate the workers, but that would be an item that would be budgeted by the tribal government if the tribal government determines to do so. So it's a permitted use, and then the tribal government would have to do an allocation, and there's a limitation on payment per hour and during this period of the pandemic. But that could be an issue, a funding issue to be taken up by the tribal government. And there's kind of guidance in the interim rule about, who would qualify, so people that promote the public safety and welfare, of the tribe, public health, safety, and welfare of the tribe, that are required to work regardless of the pandemic and who are at risk. Those are the people to be thought of.
Mark, along those same lines, Mark, would that qualify for your education systems to help with the teachers as far as what James is saying, essential employees, or at-risk employees, to increase the dollars that they receive?
I think if you're reopening the schools and they're doing classes in person, I think that should be fine. And then I think if there were people that were needing to show up to their jobs, that would make sense. And basically, it's intended to address the people that were working during the pandemic that were maybe facing additional exposure because they were required to come to their jobs, regardless of the pandemic, and other people may have been able to stay home, but some people had to be there. Those are your premium, essential workers.
Okay, I have a question about paying the frontline workers. Casino employees should be included in that if we are going to give another payment, as long as I know the DARE workers are asking for hazard pay. So if we do make that payment again, are we going to include everybody that is considered a frontline worker again? Because the mask mandate was lifted, but the employees at the casino still wear a mask, but the customers aren't required to wear masks.
I think they're in a public institution that's essential to your tribal government, so they're permissible uses. So that's a policy call for the tribal council. About who is what kind of program you're going to put in place for, premium pay. And there are some parameters in there, that we can talk about more specifically when you're looking at the program, and we could talk about it more in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Van Norman. And kind of what Susie's talking about, we have advisory on Thursday, so it was my intention. I read a little bit more on the guidance as far as some of those very intricate pieces of who is eligible, how they're eligible in all of our businesses. So I think that's something that I know that I had intended to bring up for our gaming employees. That would be probably, I was thinking if we did it like a payment to gaming and then they administer it using their formula, or we can help them develop a formula to maybe increase those. Because I do agree that that gaming employees, because they're not directly mitigating, but coming in contact with large numbers of individuals, that they should have access to some of those same premium pay criteria, I guess, maybe. So that's probably something that we can bring up, and maybe,
sure,
we can discuss
we can
further
talk that
amongst
through.
ourselves. But
Yeah.
I had intended to bring that up at our advisory on Thursday. Thank you.
I would think that your gaming establishments are essential government facilities, because not only do they provide, an entertainment service and food and lodging, so they're covered as, one of the heavily impacted industries under travel and tourism and hospitality, but they're also covered under essential employees because, they're required to be out there so you can generate the revenue that keeps the tribal government running. So yeah, and we can talk through the details of that.
Anybody else?
Anybody? Okay, sold to Cliff in the back. No, I'm kidding, sorry.
It's just made you wipe it off just to take it back. Sorry about that, Mr. Renville. So you talked a little bit about mental health, and we know that even though the federal government has not decriminalized cannabis as of yet, but would there be an option for us to maybe develop CBD as part of a supplement to our tribal members who have neurological disorders, mental health disorders, pain, as a response to maybe cancer treatments? If we pass it, would some of this funding be able to help us develop some of those pieces as far as even CBD products in the beginning and then the cannabis products later after legalization?
You know, I think if you want to use your lost government revenues, your reduced government revenues, and you've got a new program for, medical and pain relief, then that can make sense. I think using the general funding, might run you into a question with the Inspector General's office because, there is a federal law prohibition. So I think you're safer if you're going to use some of this funding to use the lost revenue funding because you have more discretion there. Otherwise, no. No, I don't know. I mean, we could look at it some more, but she was kind of not listening anymore, so I thought I'd throw that out there. I think it's possible to use lost revenue.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I think lost revenue may go back to last year, and the restriction is on paying things for expenses that are incurred on or after March 3rd. So they're kind of saying you can look back on lost revenue. Let me clarify that for you, but I think that's the rule. There's a calculation formula in the interim rule.
I guess that my question is, at the end of the day, I visited with some of the ladies over here that are pushing for education, as well as that's one of the issues I would like to see funded. At the end of the day, who's going to make the decision, what's important, what's needed, and who's going to allocate these funds?
Well, these are tribal government coronavirus fiscal relief funds. So it's intended to promote Indian self-government, Indian self-determination. It's intended for the tribal government to make those determinations. And education is a use area, and then you have to look at what you're spending it on, within the education area. If you're spending it on, making the schools more handicapped accessible, then I think that's true. I think if you're doing filters, you're doing infrastructures, you're having some enlarged class sizes, there's a whole range of things that you could do that you could think about that would be related to mitigating, the potentials of coronavirus. And there is nothing to say in particular that this thing is all the way over because there are these variants out there. So I think you can look at that from the medical point of view and the educational point of view and see what's necessary. There could be a lot of, kind of a bigger auditorium area that allows for more spacing on seating and, things like that.
On this eligible uses of funds page, how is the tribal government going to help households and individuals that COVID-19 impacted? Like utilities?
Yeah, utilities are okay, like, heating and cooling, and things to make the house more habitable. So if there's need for help with plumbing or roofing or handicap accessibility or,
Propane?
Propane, I think, is certainly developing your system, so you're going to be able to stay at home safely and comfortably in the winter. That is certainly a criteria, and you can do that. That's a utility system.
Okay, and then how would it impact the businesses? How are they going to decide
You
that?
know, I think a model that's out there already is the Paycheck Protection Program that they've already done. And they could give some grants to, you know, help retain employees, or, you know, they've also done the economic impact disaster relief money, you know, to help small businesses that are suffering. Tribal businesses could be assisted. There's also going to be a state small business credit initiative. That's a different program than we were talking about today. But I know the planning department is looking at that. Matt Thompson in particular is looking at that. He's all over it. He's working with the banks.
Okay, then I wanted to ask about the assistance to unemployed workers and assistance to households. How will they be helped?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are flexible, and you can look around. There are some examples in the interim rule, but you can look around and think about what other jurisdictions are doing. But I think helping households, you know, you could think that there might be assistance for the home itself. There might be assistance for the families that are in economic need. There could be nutrition assistance. There could be technology assistance for the students in the household so they can learn from home. So it's flexible. It's flexible. This money is more flexible than it was last time.
So, as the director of the Department of Transportation again, one thing, we've made a proposal for some equipment purchase for the Travel Roads program. They're taxed with the idea of fixing driveways, clearing snow, you know, stuff like that in our rather trying winters to get folks to and from hospital facilities, grocery stores, this, that, and the other thing. When we talk about trying to do that with a TTP program, you know, they put some real strict regulations on that equipment if purchased with transportation dollars. So if we were to step into the ARP funding to purchase this equipment, what sort of, that would be tribal equipment then at that point, right?
Yep.
Instead of BIA equipment to be used on BIA facilities.
Right.
So that was one of my proposals. Also, then we put together some costs for a SWO DOT facility. There again, when we talk about trying to use the TTP funding to build a facility of this nature, you have to actually turn the land into BIA, you know, land. You have to create a corridor, and then it's a BIA facility used by the tribe. But if we were to step into a funding opportunity with the ARP funding, this would be then a tribal facility to be rented by the BIA to come into the tribal facility, correct?
Well, I'm sure you can justify using some of these funds for transportation purposes. Of course, you know, Cliff, one thing that's going to be important is there's going to be a lot of transportation money, and it's going to be important to fully utilize, you know, those other funds. Didn't they get that Navajo guy to go over and work with Secretary Buttigieg over there? You know, maybe we want to get on the phone with them and see what they can do. Certainly transportation is permissible fund use because, you know, obviously you need roads for people to get to school and work and food and emergency medical use and everything else. So certainly that's going to be some kind of permissible use. They're really looking to infrastructure on transportation to be coming from the transportation infrastructure, and they're doubling that program. So I think part of that is making sure that these monies are more flexible for various purposes, and making sure that any place we get federal money elsewhere that's workable, that we use those as well.
Right.
You know that.
Right. So like I say, when we talk about the jobs money that they're talking about, they'll probably roll that into the TTP program, which would come through in our government-to-government agreement, into our gold money market, which would be governed then by the 25 CFR. And then it's federal dollars we have to spend on the federal infrastructure system. Makes it a little trying for us to fix our tribal roads, which we get taxed with the tribal roads program also. We have those issues here on the reservation. But the federal dollars just can't be folded into that without creating federal corridors. That's basically giving up tribal land for the right-of-way for this road to go to 3 different houses, So, like I say, if we were to use the ARP money to build the tribal roads facility, which they've been working out of a pole shed for the state-of-the-art pole shed for the last 20 years or so ago when we built it. So to bring it to a new, to-date facility with drive-through bays, with our transit program, we could expand it to fit those in there also. And then we could actually reach out to these federal programs, the TTP program, the FTA transit program, and the BIA maintenance program, and they could actually pay the tribe rent to be able to move into this building, and that would be your PMO, is that they talk about, to keep this building moving forward in a good transportation direction for the Lake Traverse Reservation. So
I'm sure there's a solid plan there, that interfaces with all of these programs. So, yeah, depends on how you configure it. And that was those 2 questions. So if you're saying like this, we need transportation coverage for our tribal rural roads because our people need to have access, 365 days of the year, 24/7 for emergency medical assistance, for work, for school, for food, for essentials, then it can be justified as part of the emergency, part of the public health emergency, and part of the economic impacts of the public health emergency. So, it's a question of, how do you answer those issues, and then what other resources, what other federal resources there are to dovetail. Some of these things should be dovetailed because if they're going to have a lot of money for clean water, for example, some of the money should be coming from clean water. Some of the money can come from the coronavirus relief, and some of the money could come from, EPA or IHS or USDA. So that's the thing right now. These agencies are all getting this additional funding. And so it's a question of how to best utilize all of that. So you are right about that. There's a piece of this that could come from the tribe if that's a tribal priority.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I know it's been talked about in a plan already, but how realistic is it that the tribe can get their own ambulance service? I work at the radio station there, and I have access to the ambulance calls, and you'd be surprised how many ambulance calls we get just for even a twisted ankle. And they're tribal members, and they're always coming out to the agency, and I sit there one time, and it takes a while to get out to the tribe, but if we had like a central one in agency that, are the first responders that everybody is, they're having classes on that, first responders, or, that type of thing, maybe we could save the pain and anguish of people that have to wait to get to the hospital or to Fargo, because there's Fargo trips all the time.
Well, definitely if you have a transport system that helps you with your PRC care and your emergency response, that's definitely going to be within the realm of responding to the public health emergency. Because we certainly have many patients that were requiring, hospitalization and emergency care based out of COVID, and it's certainly a possibility in the future. So I think the difficult thing for the tribal government is it always seems like a lot of money when you say it, but when you think of all the needs, it's a question of balancing those needs and prioritizing those. But that's something that there could be a kind of a creative solution with IHS, because IHS is going to pay that transport anyway. And so they should think about how you can most efficiently provide that service, because that will actually minimize the impact on your IHS budget, right? So I think that's worthwhile. That's a very worthwhile one to think about, because, they always talk about the golden hour, of getting medical care within the hour after, whatever the incident that arises, whether it's a heart attack or stroke or whatever, or an accident, that you're more likely to survive if you can get that emergency response. So obviously that's a, critical need in rural America and Indian country in particular.
I'm the tax director for the tribe. On the first round of funding, we could not tax any of the projects. We could not impose our tribal construction, consultant, other taxes on the project. So my question is, under the second round, you say it's more liberal and open. So is there anything in the regulations that says we may not impose our tribal taxes on these projects? Because I would like to see us get construction use, excise tax from it, consultant taxes, and other taxes.
We might as well just ask them that question straight up at Treasury. I didn't see it addressed in their paper. Their paper's a preliminary paper, but there's no reason not to ask them the question. They're welcoming questions and they're welcoming dialogue.
And how would I go about doing that?
Well, we could talk to the chairman's office and, put together a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury and to these consultation people and raise that question. It needs to come from the tribe, from the council and the chairman.
But as far as there's nothing in the regulations now prohibiting tribal taxes on those projects.
Yeah, but you know how it goes. Last time they did all the facts, and that's what Curtis was talking about, the FAQs that came out after the fact. So I'm not going to stand here and say that the answer is yes when the paper doesn't say anything about it. But if we want to ask the question, we certainly can. And I think that that's completely appropriate to get that clarification.
The second question is, unfortunately with our reservation in the state of South Dakota, they impose their state taxes on our construction projects. We impose our tribal taxes, so our contractors are getting taxed twice. Is there any kind of remedy we could do to eliminate the state taxes on these projects for our contractors?
Well, for a long time, we've been talking about dual taxation in Indian country and the problems of dual taxation, because you have the poorest communities in America facing a double tax burden. And, when it's really close to tribal government, then, I think the state should take into consideration the need for tribal self-government to do its programs and services, and that should be something that we talk to about with the state and say, this is really too close to Indian self-determination for you to impose a double tax. So I think there's an opportunity there, to do that and also pursue it. We've always talked about modernizing the federal trader's license regulations, because really this is Indian country commerce. This is Indian commerce. And so it shouldn't be overly burdened.
Right. Well, the state is very stringent. They require us to show the project is going to be a, quote, Indian use only project, like our admin building. But we even have problems getting that tax exemption for construction of some of our housing projects. Because they say, well, there may be some date or time when there will be a non-tribal member living in that house. So your
Well,
contractors have to pay
you know,
construction tax.
Then I think the governor ought to take ownership of that, and if they're gonna have a ridiculous state policy, everyone should know it comes from the governor. You know, if they're gonna have a solid partnership policy, they should know it comes from the governor. So I think the governor's office should be involved rather than just the bureaucrats, and it should be elevated, and it should be elevated to the legislature if need be, and to the federal government. So those should all be explored, because you need to capture your own revenues from the economic activities that you're generating in Indian country. And that's a clear need across the board for Indian country.
Okay, I'll contact the chairman's office on that issue.
Okay, well, if everybody else wants a coffee break, it's a pleasure, and I'm happy to come back to another meeting, and I'm sure we're going to have other meetings as we, determine how to move forward with everything. And happy to stay engaged.
I'll let him know that, and then we'll have a meeting.
So your advice to the tribe would be that, we did this strategic planning and stuff like that, would be to start figuring out where the funding sources are coming from, if they're coming from the American Jobs Plan, are from the ARP, are from other funding sources, to start sorting that out in order so we're not trying to fund the same project with other funding, that we could move forward with the ARP money that, that could, where it's needed more than with the jobs plan coming through, that, there's a lot of water, water for the water waste facilities and stuff like that, and the transportation and stuff is in there, that, that we're not trying to cross paths. Is that what you're kind of suggesting on how we move forward with that?
I guess what I'm saying is that your tribal government coronavirus fiscal recovery fund is going to be your most flexible money. So when you have other pots of money that are available, you want to utilize those other pots of money and then fill in the gaps with your flexible tribal government relief funds, because those are supposed to last you for the next 2 years, and that's the expectation. So you should have a plan that's going to, have these monies available, and maybe some contingency plan, where some money is held for, 18 months in case something comes up in the last 6 months. So I think those type of considerations are important. And then we need to look at all of this federal funding, because President Biden is trying to build back better, as he said in his campaign, and he's trying to get the money out to make sure that the economy takes off, that regular people get good jobs, and that we restore manufacturing and technology in America so that we're a leader. So all of these things are happening at the same time. They're intending to get rid of all the lead pipes. If we have areas with asbestos, lead, problems with the drinking water, if you have open lagoons, it needs to be looked at, and the water and sewer needs to be brought up to date and modernized now. The danger needs to come out of the system. The contamination and pollution needs to come out of the system. And you need to think about where you want to be going forward, because what the administration is telling you is they want to see American communities be healthy. And so these opportunities are there. So that is exactly right. There's more funding coming, and those funds have to be utilized to the greatest extent possible. And these are your best and most flexible funds right here. So that was a good insight.
Thank you. I just have need some clarification on all of this that we're having here. This is our fourth day that we've had this, where everybody came together and we're talking about the funds coming and stuff. Now, your part in this is as informational purposes, not what, trying to help us get these projects off the ground or anything. It's just for like information and what we can and cannot do with these funds.
You know, I don't think you're at the point of getting the projects off the ground yet, because I think you're still, you know, in the planning process. So I think the planning process, you know, has to proceed, and these federal resources are coming. So the idea is to look at what kind of federal resources there are going to be to come. The policy decisions as to how to allocate tribal government funds, I think, are issues for the tribal government and the tribal community.
I guess I'm looking for some type of guidance here, because right now I know we don't even have a list of what we're going to be. I mean, we're just bringing out all these ideas, what we'd like, our wish list, as you might say, and then from that wish list, then we come in, and I'm thinking maybe you come in and you say, okay, yeah, you can, no, you can't, you can, no, you can't. Is that what this is all about?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think it's an informational meeting so that you guys can develop your own ideas and concepts about what you need to do best by your community. And I think that's what people are looking for here. Certainly there is a parameter, and we did try and talk about the parameter a little bit. And the primary thing is addressing the coronavirus public health emergency and its negative economic impacts. And that includes possibly assistance to households, small businesses, heavily impacted industries like travel, tourism, and hospitality. It includes potentially premium pay for essential workers. It includes potentially water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And it also includes calculating lost government revenue, and then reallocating that to government purposes. So it's a process, and you have to go through the process to get to the plan.
Thank you.
And, you know, we did mention those couple of questions. How does the spending address the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts? And how is the spending designed to remediate those issues? So that's what Treasury is asking folks to look at through the planning process.
Any other questions? Anything online, Tom? Contra?
And I think for Mark, before he has to leave, I know he has to go back to the admin building to help us with some administrative stuff. Anything from, you missed one, Travis. And also, too, I appreciate Travis for stepping up and also being at Yapaha for the meeting. I know the last meeting you had with DCA, there was a lot of questions and confusion, so this is my attempt to clarify those questions and everything I had. So, Krista, I'm going to turn the mic over to Krista. I can hand it to her. Or you got one of those hand wipers? Hand sanitizer?
So, good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize. I just found out like late about this meeting, so I had some other engagement, so apologize for that. But for our district, we have some concerns about funding for economic development, and you might have went over that, but I think I just want to stress the importance of economic development to our leadership and to the other programs here, not only for our tribe, but also for individual members that have businesses already. Like at Enemy Swim, we have a guy he produces, raises beef, cattle, and so he sells it. So he's got an interest and need for, like equipment and just some support for his business. And then we have We have some other businesses one business that went out because of COVID, during this past year, she had to shut her doors. So those kind of businesses, and our own district is interested in doing a business. We have a business committee, we have a few ideas. And so a lot of the people are asking about economic development for individuals, and also for our districts to so that we can help boost the economy that way. We also have questions on individuals. Are they going to be eligible again for like the $1,000 help with lights or rent? We still have people getting evicted to this day. I mean, just like as recent as last week. In our housing, we've had several evictions. People are just out of work. So those are some concerns. Another concern is now this money is recovery to get us over. Right now, we have a lot of people who are on unemployment or who just don't want to work. And so what about, can our tribe, can we do something to, I don't know, maybe like a career development or advancement, something to help people to get back to their jobs? It's been a rough year. Some have been on unemployment. Now the state is cutting off the extra $300 bonus that people were getting. And so, sometimes it's easier because you would get more on unemployment than if you're going to go work a $9 or $10 an hour job. But that's going to be ending. And I know that our casinos and many there's jobs out there, but how do we address the issue of getting people to go to work? And some of these things in the Recovery Act, I think those are some of the important questions that, we need to be thinking about the people and trying to help them to recover from this COVID. And then, like the mental illness part of it, May is Mental Illness Awareness Month. There's a lot of things, we have a lot of programs in our tribe that if we could try to just come together, and I think this is more for our leadership, how do we boost all of our programs so that we can all move forward with all of this money coming in? Those are some of my concerns. I guess just getting people back to work and having, all of those ideas that were in the plan. But one of the main things is people are asking out there, are we going to get any help? So I don't know about the unrestricted money, if that's going to be, allotted out, if anybody's going to get any help again, because I think certainly that's one of the biggest questions. We've got over 14,000 members. A lot of them are asking about that. So I just wanted to bring that up just to let everybody know, and I'm sure all of you know too that is on the table. So I know we have a lot of things that we have to prioritize. So those are just a few of the things that I'm concerned with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing to look at in the statute is that Congress did provide 2.5 times the money that they provided in the CARES Act for the tribal government program. Now, on the other hand, they did say that they want it to last at least 2 years, that don't, expect funding next year. They did broaden the purposes. Last year in the CARES Act, it had to be necessary to respond to COVID-19 public health emergency and economic crisis. But it had to be unbudgeted the prior year, and it had to be spent within, the 9-month parameter. So this time, it's somewhat more flexible, and they are saying respond to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts. And you can include assistance to households, assistance to small business, and hard-hit industries like travel, tourism, and hospitality. And we're taking it that hospitality means gaming. And it also says that you can provide premium pay for your essential workers that have shared, the frontline burden of responding to the pandemic. And it also says that where you've had lost tribal government revenue, you can use this revenue to replace more flexible tribal government programs because it's intending to help you do what you otherwise need to do without having to cut your budget back. And then it's saying that water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Now, in the jobs plan, they're going to come up with worker training programs. They're going to come up with programs to help reorient people who are unemployed to a working skill that's an employable skill. So there's going to be funding for that. There's going to be funding for tribal colleges. There's going to be funding for tribal college training. So there's going to be different opportunities. And I think at the same time that you plan this money, we need to look at what's going to happen with the Jobs Act and see where that money's going. Because they're also looking at clean water and different sources of clean water funding. So these potential uses are overlapping with the additional funding that is going to come in the next big jobs and infrastructure bill. So it's kind of a planning balance about where to prioritize these funds, because these are going to be your most flexible funds. And so where you're able to pull in the other funds, there is going to be additional funding, significant additional funding for low and moderate income home construction. So, it's a very dynamic and fluid situation with a lot of opportunities. And I think it's worthwhile for the tribe to consider your technical assistance providers to make sure that, the planning department and others have the technical assistance providers that they need to make full use of the funds that are going to come. So it's that kind of a budgeting and balancing act that the community and the tribe and the tribal council have to go through.
So can you answer this? Okay, so if we're getting what, 60 million? Is it 50, 60?
It's hard
60?
to say, probably at least twice what it was last time, maybe 2.5 times.
Okay, so twice of what we got last time at least. So when that money goes into our tribal account, what kind of, so if we say 50, 60 million, what kind of interest is that? And do we have a plan to use that interest, or does it just go into the general coffers?
Well, you know how it is normally with federal funds. You're going to have some kind of safety and accountability. So it's going to be a low-risk placement of the funds. And the funds can be placed, like, let's say you do reserve some money for the last 6 months of this next 2-year period, so that if something does come up, you have some money. Those could certainly be invested. Normally, you're going to invest them in a low-risk area because you're responsible for the recoupment of those funds to Treasury if it wasn't spent, if it was lost in an investment. So generally, there are going to have to be some low-risk safety parameters around investing these kind of funds. That's something the tribal government considers as you do your planning.
Well, if there's no other questions for Mr. Van Norman, I don't know how long you're sticking around, or you got to get on the road.
I got to go up to the tribal government office.
Okay. No, once, twice, 3 times.
Okay, can I just tell one joke before I leave? Oh, darn. We're out of time. Thank you. What has 4 wheels and flies?
Thanks, Mr. Van Norman. Safe travels.
All right. Thank you. Pleasure to see you.
Well, I appreciate Mark. I know I'm going to be right behind you, Mark. I know Don's trying to hit you around and take our signs. I appreciate Travis. Thank you for on a short notice. I think, thank for planning, for reaching out, Matt, for putting this all together. I know, we still got a busy week. As you guys keep your agendas tomorrow. So DCA, you're gonna have your thunder. Anybody from DCA here? Nobody from DCA? Okay, we got a couple DCA members. So make sure you got your spokesperson for DCA, you got your thunder at 2:45. I know we're not gonna be on at 2:45, probably sooner, earlier or later. Who are you pointing at, Travis? Oh, James has a question? Okay, we're gonna, Fuel Inc.'s gonna come in, we'll squeeze them in on tomorrow. But right now, I appreciate all your questions regarding, for Mark. So I appreciate the open mic, and also too, I'd like for you guys to stick around because I wanna, put a person on the spot for, a happy birthday. This individual was on council, she served on council. She's like myself, a cancer survivor, but twice cancer survivor. She's an awesome person with a great heart. She keeps me on my toes as well as Leanne. Without them guys, I'll be lost without my schedule. And even sometimes I gotta get after them too because sometimes they miss my meetings too and they already get me confused. But with that, I want to have Don stand up. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Don. Happy birthday to you. And I don't sing for everybody either. She was trying to head out too. I said, no, hold on. I wanted to sound like Marilyn Monroe with that. But at least stick around for your cake. So, yeah, the cake will be here. It's supposed to be at 2 o'clock sharp, so I was hoping Mark Van Norman would tell a long joke. That was our plan. But we're going to be bringing your cake and ice cream. But I know you guys have a schedule, but if your guys' rooms are acting up, please have some cake and ice cream with us. With that, I'll give the mic to our Yapaha.
We got 2 to 2:15 a break. Or do you guys want to go right to, after that is open microphone for RPC or DCA members? You guys want to take a break or you guys want to keep going? DCA, Jesse? Break? Okay, she called it, 15-minute break. Well, the next part of our agenda was to be RPC and DCA, but I think there's just a couple guys here from those particular committees. We're thinking about just putting you guys on tomorrow, unless Jesse or Crystal or Kenny. Yeah, you want to be pushed till tomorrow? The next part of the agenda was RPC and DCA, and that was to take us till 4 o'clock, but I think there's only a couple of you guys here, right?
Yeah, I guess all our concerns from DCA, and then our vice chairwoman isn't even here. I mean, and that's what we brought us down here for, was to see where our next 100,000 is from the first CARES Act funding. Well, then some of us haven't even gotten our first portion of the CARES Act funding, so I don't know who's going to tell us any different, other than the other day. Susie, Dion, Lou, Roy, Don.
A lot of, regarding Dickie's question on that, Madam Vice Chair will be here tomorrow because I think we're going to go in session with council tomorrow. And also too, you guys are on the schedule anyway with DCA and RPC, so you guys could save your thunder until tomorrow. So.
With that, I'm going to drop the mic. Okay, well, move you guys till tomorrow. That concludes our agenda for today then. We're going to push you guys till tomorrow. I think there's plenty of cake left over there. I see there's some coffee here. But that concludes our agenda for today. Thank you for showing up, bringing all your questions and concerns. Doksta, travel safely.